Chapter 15. Mason, convinced that he has been set upon a pilgrimage by forces beyond his ability at present to reach, a station of the cross being his preferred trope, finds much to puzzle in Maskelyne's insistence that they move to the other side of the island. From enclosure to exposure, from shelter to an unremitting and much warned against wind. The attraction of mountains, Maskelyne jobates, whilst slowly round him the moon becomes a dormitory. According to Newton, these peaks may hold enough mass to deflect our plumb lines, thereby throwing off our zenith orbs. We must therefore repeat these orbs at the other side of the island, and take the mean values betwixt them. The other side. It does give Mason a chill. If the Cape of Good Hope be a parable about slavery and free will, he fancies he has almost, though not quite, grasped. Then what of this translocation? That Maskelyne's obsessedness in the article of plumb lines may be a factor in the change will not become apparent till too late. Days in a row now pass in which Maskelyne speaks of little but the faulty suspension of the Sisson instrument. My career, my life, hanging from a damned pin. He takes to accosting strangers in the Moon, and then in other taverns, subjecting them to long, wearying recitations describing the malfunction in numbing detail, and what he has instructed be done to correct it, and how others have complied or not, a history without sentiment or suspense, save that in which the plumb line, as it proves faultily, hangs upon its loop, and that upon its pin. How did Waddington like it over there? Mason inquires. He wouldn't go. Not even a day excursion to Sandy Bay. I know the score, he said again and again. I've seen them come into town from the windward side. I see what the wind does to 'em. It is no condition I care to enter, was how he put it. It doesn't sound all that appealing to me either, allows Mason. Yet, to cancel error when possible, it's like turning the instrument, isn't it? An obligation, not easily neglected. Neglect, conscience. Flanked by the Devil's Garden and the gates of chaos, the company fort at Sandy Bay commands the inhospitable, luminously turquoise recess in the shore, representing the level of daring that Johnny Company is expected one day in its ideal enemy, the silent windward side companion to the great fort at Jamestown, which ever bustles with sentries and martial music, whilst this one appears deserted, flagless, walls unpierced, as if drawn in against the wind. The discipline here, though military in name, is founded in fact upon a rip-rap of play-acting, superstitions, mortal hatreds, and unnatural loves, of a solemnity appropriate to the unabating wind, that first voice not yet inflected, the pure whirl of the very planet. The gunfire here is at sunset, and aimed full into the wind, as if to repel an onslaught. Years ago the soldiers set up, and now continue as a tradition, various suicide banks and madness pools, into which one may put as little as a sixpence, more substantial sums going into side wages, and the percentages of widows' shares being ever negotiable, and thus convert this wind into cash, as others might convert it to a rotary impulse upon a millstone. Fortune, certainly the equal of many a nabob's, amassed, risked, and lost within a night. "We are the doings of global trade and miniature," cries the post-surgeon, who tries never to stir too far from the deepest rooms of the fort, where the wind may oppress him least, and is careful to include in it in each daily prayer, as if 'twere a deity in itself, infinitely in need, ever demanding. Poised at length upon the last cliff, with the eternal southeaster full upon them, Mason, knowing he cannot be heard, says, "Well, Waddington may have had a point." Masculine nevertheless plucks from the wind his meaning, and later, indoors at Sandy Bay, replies, It is not to all tastes here. 'Tis said those who learn to endure it are wondrously transformed. Oh, aye, that farmer last night who ran about barking and bit the landlord's wife. Very diverting, sir. Yet perhaps upon this coast there be merely mad, finding as little welcome at James's Town, where sobriety is necessary to commerce, as those folk might upon the windward, where against such helpless exposure as this, a vigilant folly must be the only defence. Two distinct nations, in a state of mutual mistrust, within 10 miles compass, and the wind never relenting, as if causing to accumulate in the island yet another influence that must be corrected for. Perhaps, if discovered, 'twould be as celebrated as the aberration of light. Masculine flushes darkly and seems to change the topic. I was out upon the cliffs today and fell in with one of the company soldiers here. German fellow, Data. Came out that he's in something of a spot, enlisted in ignorance that any place like this could exist. Now he wants out, suggests Mason. A strangely affecting case, nonetheless. I cannot explain it. He seemed to know me, or I him. Had you been there? He might have seemed to know me as well. Am I so unwary? Your innuendo is not new to me, yet he has asked for no money. And what matter that he knows of my connection with Clive? Oh dear, how'd that happen? I told him. He was quite distraught, and but a pace or two from the edge of the precipice. No one can help me, he was crying. Not Frederick of Prussia, nor George of England, nor the great Lord Clive himself, and so forth, and I being the only one within earshot able to say, well, actually, as to Clive, you know, what would you have done? Were I in a position to offer Clive's services to the public? Why, I don't know, Masculine. Determine first of all what percentage to take, I suppose. The German had stood there, in the late sunlight, his eyes enormous and magnetic, fixing the astronomer where he stood. The sea roaring below them, and in the wind stock ends, kerchiefs, queue ribands, all coming undone and fluttering like so many telltales. You could really help? I've been living over in Jamestown, masculine, deferent, attempting to speak calmly. This is the first time I've passed more than a day over here, yet I find already that the wind is having an effect upon my nerves, causing me to imagine things that may not be so. Have you noticed that? The wind owns this island, Data informed him. What awful pride to keep a station here. Who would ever invade by way of this mortal coast? If they survived landing upon a lee shore, they must get inland in a day, once into those mountains, obliged to cross all that width of purgatory before descending upon James's town. Are the Dutch that crazy, ravening, lost to the world? The French, 3 of their men of war only the year before last stationed themselves out there, lounging to windward, just in the middle of the company's sea lane, like village ne'er-do-wells hoping for a fight. They managed to intercept and chase 4 of the company's China ships, who at last made a run for South America, finding refuge in the Bay of All Saints. We watched it all, as we had every day, day and night. The sails, the signals through the glass. We swore to shapes in the darkness, creeping ashore in the terrible moonlight. And what do your hosts over there at James's Fort expect to see coming down out of their ravine? What last unfaceable enemy? When one night, out of habit, someone will look up at the watchfire upon the ridge and find they're all black as doom, overrun, all gone mad and simply walked away, how much time elapsed and how much remaining to the town? The company promised travel, adventure, dusky maidens, and one day, now albeit, a silken curtain opening upon life itself. Who would not have been persuaded? So I enlisted, and without time to catch a breath was I posted here, to the windward side of St. Helena. God who hath abandoned us, we are spiritually ill here, depraved. You are Clive of India's brother-in-law. A word from you would set me free. Well, I haven't that much influence with the company, and Clive has but recently returned to England, whilst I, he shrugged, am here, I suppose. And Shuja ud Dola, the Nabob Wazir of Oud, is out there with an army. Bengal, sir, is a magazine waiting to explode. No time for your schwager to be in England, when perhaps already too late it grows. His enemies among his own, Maskelyne supposed, being inveterate as any Hindu intriguer, and Leadenhall Street no simpler than the Bagh Bazaar. England is a battlefield to him, upon which he must engage. Since the Court of Directors' election, he has been locked in a struggle with Mr. Sullivan for the soul of the company. I am not sure how many favours he may command right now, even of the dimension you suggest. Sobald das Geld in Kasten klingt, Data recited, sighing, "Die Ziel aus dem Gefühl springt." Apologies. As soon as the money sounds in the box, the soul jumps out of purgatory, apparently. Later, talking it over with Mason, "Though there be no escape from this place for me, the logic of the orbit, the laws of Newton and Kepler constraining, yet could I ransom at least one soul from this awful wind, the levy money would not be missed." "You said he asked for none." "Not he, the company. So they are paid the £20 they paid him to enlist. It matters little who replaces him." Does Maskelyne mean more when he speaks of the wind? May he be thinking of his own obligations to the East India Company and the unlikelihood that anyone would ever ransom him? "We may sail with the wind," he said once, "at the same speed, working all its nuances, or we may stand still and feel its full true course and speed upon us, with all finer motions lost in that simplicity." The incident of the German soldier in Maskelyne's life seems like St. Helena itself, the visible and torn remnant of a sub-history unwitnessed. None of what Maskelyne says about it quite explains the power over his sentiments that data exerts. "You'll pay the money yourself?" Mason only trying to be helpful. "I can't go to Clive, can I? Not for this." Mason is almost unsettled enough by the wind to ask, "For what then? Will you go to him?" Some last flinching of sanity prevents him. For where might the discussion go? "What do you desire in the world? Is it in Clive's power to bestow? How appropriate is it in scale for a brother-in-law? What balance shall you owe him then?" None of the words need ever be spoken, though given the wind and its properties of transformation, there are no guarantees they will not be. Yet, if Mason but remains silent, keeping his wits about him and his arse out of the wind, who's to say that one day when this too has passed, back in England, among colonnades, mirrors, uniforms and ball gowns, medals and orders, necklaces and brooches incandescent, and the applause of philosophical Europe, Lord Clive may not approach discreetly, bearing an embossed envelope. "You've been commended most warmly, sir, by my dear brother-in-law, as largely having restored him to reason after his prolonged residence at St. Helena had somewhat diminished it. Horrid station, one good volcanic eruption. Why, 'twould solve everything, but, as I was saying, I needn't tell you, Neville's sanity is important to me, as I'm sure it must be to Lady Clive as well. I wish I knew some better way to express. But, being Clive of India, alas, does not." The stiff cream object approaching Mason's hand, "for preserving the futurity of astronomy in Britain." Thus, at the instant of first exterior contact, before immersion of the gift into a coat pocket, all honour Mason might take in the moment is drained away as even his daydreams turn upon him, allowing among them Clive anointing Maskelyne, as if in some particularly tasteless painting destined to hang at the Greenwich Observatory. It has its elements of excess, masculine will admit, Clive's tunic in particular, and one or two of the attending dignitaries' hats. Yet see how he's draped me. Mason returns from these excursions dejectedly mindful, like any moral tumbler, that when murder is too inconvenient, self-sacrifice must do. Though 'tis not possible for him to imagine masculine as quite ever blazing enough for any grand or even swift immolation. 'Twould be a slow roast, years in length, that awaited any who might come spiraling in his way, gleefully prefacing each with a whispered, "Of course this is but romance." Mason then wallows in reveries, more and more elaborate, of mishaps for masculine, many of them vertical in nature. And here it is, upon the windward side, where no ship ever comes willingly, that her visits begin. At some point, Mason realizes he has been hearing her voice, clearly, clean of all intervention. 'Tis 2 years and more. Rebecca, who in her living silences drove him to moments of fury, now wrapped in what should be the silence of her grave, has begun to speak to him, as if free to do so at last. All she couldn't have whispered at Greenwich, not with the heavens so close, with the light-handed trickery of God so on display. He tries to joke with himself. Isn't this supposed to be the age of reason? To believe in the cold light of this all-business world that Rebecca haunts him is to slip, to stagger in a crowd into the embrace of the painted Italian whore herself, and the air to fill with suffocating incense and the radiant deity to go dim forever. But if reason be also permission at last to believe in the evidence of our earthly senses, then how can he not concede to her some resurrection, to deny her how cruel? Yet she can come to him anywhere. He understands early that she must come, that something is important enough to risk frightening him too much, driving him further from the world than he has already gone. She may choose a path and, to all others masked, a shadow, wait for him. She can wait now. Is this her redress for the many times he failed to attend her whilst she lived? Now must he go through it and not miss a word? That these furloughs from death are short does not console him. Once, long before dawn, bidden he can scarce say how, Mason rises from his cot. Masculine across the shelter, snoring in a miasma of wine fumes in an ob suit patched together from local sources, whose colours in the gloom are mercifully obscured. Enters the wind, picks his way, cross boots slashing rock, up over the ridgeline and down onto the floor of a ruined ebony forest, where among fog wisps and ancient black logging debris polished by the wind, she accosts him, shivering in his cloak. The ocean beats past the tiny accidental island. I can't have mescaline finding me out here. I imagined you'd missed me, she replies in her own unmodified voice. Christ. The moonlight insists she is there. Her eyes have broken into white and grown pointed at the outer ends. Her ears are black like a cat's. What are you up to here, Charlie? What is this place? He tells her, for the first time since the seahorse, he is afraid again. For the distance to one star? Your lie-by was alone here for months. He managed. Why do you remain? Earth being now nearly an orbit's diameter distant from where she was, the work requires two, and I must do as others direct. But wait till you're over here, Maupery. You refer to... He twirls his hand at her, head to toe, uncertain how or whether to bring up the topic of death and having died. She nods, her smile not, so far, terrible. Telling masculine is out of the question. Mason believes he would sooner or later use it to someone's detriment. But when at last Dixon does come up the sea steps at James's town, Mason will seize his arm and whisk him off to his local, the ruined officer, to tell him as soon as he can. Then she has come to me since. She came last night. They are sitting in front of, but not drinking, 2 glasses of Cape Constantia. Oh, aye. Stubborn, heat in his face. Damn, she was here. Was it not her soul? What then? Memory is not so all-enwrapping. Dream sooner or later betrays itself. If an actor or a painted portrait may represent a personage no longer alive, might there not be other modalities of appearance as well? No, nothing of reason in it. In truth, I have ever waited meeting her again, nodding as if to confirm it. He continues, though not aloud. There is a countryside in my thoughts, populated with agreeable company, mapped with romantic scenery, standing stones and broken archways, cedar and yew, shaded streams and meadows ariot with wild flowers, holding therein assemblies and frolics, and each time somewhere by surprise goes Rebecca, ever at a distance, but damned is she, and a moment passes in which we have recognized each other. My breath goes away. I turn to marble. Oh, Dixon, I am afraid. Dixon, carefully, keeping back as far as he can get, stretches an arm and places his hand on Mason's shoulder. Mason's feet remain tranquil. Then he is smiling to himself at the foolishness of this, of everything. What shall I do? Why, get on with it, replies Dixon. Easy advice to give. How often I've done it. Even easier to take, friend, for there's no alternative. Do you believe what you're saying? How has getting on with it been working out for you then? You expect me to live in the eternal present, like some Hindu? Wonderful, my own guru, ever here with a sage answer. Tell me then, what if I can't just let her drop? What if I won't just leave her to the weather and forgetfulness? What if I want to spend, even squander, my precious time trying to make it up to her somehow? Do you think anyone can simply let all that go? Thou must, Dixon does not say. Instead, tilting his wineglass at Mason as if it were a leaden ale can, he beams sympathetically. Then thou must break thy silence and tell me somewhat of her. End of chapter.